Now, after 30 years of dominating South African politics, the ruling African National Congress will face its toughest election next week, as most opinion polls predict it will lose its preliminary parliamentary majorities for the first time. Now, once admired under the leadership of Nelson Mandela and regarded as a beacon of hope for the black majority following the fall of apartheid in 1994, the ANC's reputation has been battered by record levels of unemployment, widespread poverty, the collapse of some government services, and more than a decade of corruption scandals, leaving voters quite disillusioned.
And now for that, the former South African President, Jacob Zuma, on Thursday criticized the country's highest court and his former allies in the ruling African National Congress over his disqualification from next week's election and said he would fight for his rights in a disciplined way. Now, Zuma's comment came in a video message he said he was aimed at the people of South Africa and released on social media 6 days before the possibly pivotal national vote. The 82-year-old former leader made clear he would still campaign against the ANC he once led in the run-up to Wednesday's elections with his new political party. Now, even though he has been barred from standing as a candidate for a return to Parliament 6 years after he resigned the presidency under a cloud of corruption allegations.
Now, joining us to discuss the potentials that lie therein for the MK or the ANC parties is Dr Noluthando Phungula. Thank you for joining us. She is from the Pan-African Institute for African Thoughts and Conversation. Thank you very much for joining us, Noluthando. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, would like to find out what exact factors do you believe have led the ANC's significant decline in popularity over the past many years?
All right. So, I think a good point to start is that the ANC in South Africa remains the dominant party. And yes, as you rightfully said, the party has lost popularity in the country. And this is, as you said in your opening statement, as a result of many factors. So we're looking at a lot of corruption, scandals around corruption. We're also looking at mismanagement of money, the economy. There's also a lot of inequality in the country, a lot of crime. The party has also failed to create employment opportunities and also issues of service delivery. So we're looking at issues such as water, and you would know we have had for years issues with electricity, what we call load shedding in the country, and also the political infighting in the party itself.
Now, you just spoke to the corruption scandals. Can you elaborate on the impact of the corruption scandals on the ANC's reputation, and especially when it comes to voters and the voter base?
Yeah, so the corruption scandals have really dented the party's reputation. But despite this, let's not forget that the ANC holds very important credentials in the country. It is one of the main liberation struggle parties. So because of this, the ANC has continued to enjoy majority for over 20 years in the country. However, these credentials have been tainted, as we've said. But nonetheless, the party still enjoys a huge following in the country, particularly in rural areas, also in townships. And I think that people in the rural areas and also in townships still continue to vote for the ANC. And why is this? These are the people that have not forgotten that the ANC was the party that actually liberated them from the very brutal apartheid government, or the apartheid regime right now. Moreover, the ANC in those particular areas has been instrumental in the provision of water, electricity, and so on. So the poor areas mainly have continued to vote for the ANC. However, the more affluent areas have been divided in their votes. They've been able to voice their dissatisfaction with the party. But we also have the people that are benefiting from the ANC being in power, and these people are continuing to vote for the ANC.
Okay, so let's talk about the opposition for the ANC, which is the MK, the uMkhonto weSiswe party. It being led originally by the former president himself, Jacob Zuma. Now, if the ANC is under plenty of attack for the corruption scandals that it's had over the past many years, and the MK party is being led by Jacob Zuma, who himself has got his own share of scandals, what other options do voters have? And what are the potentials if the ANC actually loses this time?
All right. So it's if the ANC loses, it's going to be quite tricky in the country because it's going to be for the first time that we are going to have a coalition arrangement. And this means that the ANC will have to actually adapt to power sharing and also compromise. So what happens in the country is that we vote political parties to the National Assembly, and they then vote for the president within a month of the general election. A challenge that we do have in the country is that our constitution doesn't make provisions for coalition governments and how they should be formed and how they should be run. So this actually poses a challenge. Then in terms of the former president and his newly formed MK party, I think that the former president is a very influential man. His formulation of the party and the MK actually threatens the ANC, particularly because many members of the MK, uMkhonto weSiswe party, are members of the ANC. These are people that love the ANC. And however, they are unhappy with how the ANC has been conducting itself currently. So definitely it does pose a threat for the ANC because majority of the people or the members of the MK are members of the ANC.
And what are your thoughts on Jacob Zuma's recent criticism of the South African judiciary and his former allies within the ANC?
Well, I think it lies in the point that you just made there, his former allies. Definitely the Constitutional Court's decision is not in favor of the former president. So I think it's natural for him to then criticize the Constitutional Court. However, he would have to abide by the decision of the court. The court, however, has said that even though he is barred from participating in the National Assembly, he can still lead the party in other ways, just not in the National Assembly.
And also, still on Zuma, right? But how significant is Zuma's influence in South African politics today, despite his, disqualification from the upcoming elections?
All right. So as I've said, Zuma has been quite smart in the way that he's positioned himself. So this is a man who's positioning himself as sort of a messiah, to say that I am the savior of everyone who loves the ANC but is unhappy with the ANC, particularly under the leadership of President Ramaphosa. So as I said, I do think that he's quite influential. And how do we see this? His party is less than 6 months old. However, it is threatening the ANC. So the polls are suggesting that the ANC could get just over 40% and the MK over 8%. So that's making it the fourth largest in the National Assembly. So it definitely poses a threat. And I'd also like us to just look at his influence via the July unrest of 2021. So that came about as a result of his imprisonment during the time. So we can see he enjoys a lot of support in KwaZulu-Natal, also in Gauteng, and also in Mpumalanga, and the rest of the country as well. So those that love him really love him, and those that don't really don't. But he is indeed a man of influence.
So very interestingly, you just said what I was about to ask regarding his strongholds, which you just mentioned, KwaZulu-Natal being his home province would be, well, he would have plenty of supporters there. But coming to the ANC, where do they still hold a majority over? What provinces, and what's the potential come Wednesday? Where do you think they might have the biggest support?
Whoa, yeah, that's a tricky one. I think in total, so in the National Assembly, they've said the ANC is most likely to get 40% of the votes and above. So the ANC, I think, is still going to lead. However, I think in KZN and also somewhat in Gauteng, the MK is really going to eat away from the votes of the ANC. So definitely, I think Mpumalanga, Gauteng, and also KZN, the MK is really going to be making inroads.
Well, Noluthando, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you for doing this with us and just joining us today on this edition of Focus Africa.
Thank you.